Hello, good morning. Welcome to another exciting time. We talk about business. It is Business 360 and my name is Vladon Kem. On Business 360 today, India and EU race to seal trade pacts by year end. Let's begin from there. India and the European Union are holding crucial trade talks in New Delhi this week, aiming to secure a deal by year end, according to reports. Multiple identities indicate that the negotiations relaunched in 2022 have accelerated since U.S. President Donald Trump doubled tariffs on Indian goods last month over New Delhi's Russian oil purchases, hitting exports such as textiles and chemicals. At the same time, Brussels, also targeted by Trump's tariff, is stepping up trade alliances worldwide. 11 of 23 chapters have been closed, though differences remain on agriculture, autos, alcohol, food safety and labor and environmental standards. And now you're looking at a pact with Africa. South Africa has dispatched officials to the United States to prepare for formal trade negotiations aimed at reversing steep tariffs, President Cyril Ramaphosa stated and announced on Tuesday. Multiple indications show that the move follows months of unsuccessful attempts to reach a deal with the Trump administration, which imposed a 30% tariff on South African imports last month. Ramaphosa told Parliament the presidency and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition have sent representatives who are preparing for further formal negotiations with the United States government, which should be taking place in just a few days. The delegation is expected to meet with members of the U.S. administration, lawmakers and business leaders in New York and Washington as Pretoria seeks to ease trade tensions and restore economic cooperation. In Nigeria, the Federal Inland Revenue Service has said that the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission is key in its drive to enforce voluntary tax compliance. According to the statement from the service, the FIRS Executive Chairman Dr. Zaja Dedeji stated this during a courtesy visit to the EFCC headquarters in Abuja. The newly signed Tax Act will go into effect in January 2026. The new laws transform FIRS into the Nigerian Revenue Service. During the visit, the two agencies renewed their commitments to collaborate more in order to strengthen Nigeria's tax compliance framework and safeguard public revenue. Still in Nigeria, the Nigerian Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers (NUPENG) has announced the suspension of its nationwide strike. The suspension followed an agreement reached on Tuesday. The agreement was reached on Tuesday with the management of Dangote Refinery and petrochemicals on contentious issues of workers' unionization. Several fuel stations across the country were shut down on Tuesday, following the two-day industrial action by members of NOPEC. The strike followed allegation against the Dangote Group, stating that the company denied its employees the right to join recognized labor unions. At a conciliation meeting convened by the Minister Mohammed Maigari Adingadi, both parties held lengthy discussions that produced a memorandum of understanding MOU signed in Abuja. The signed MOU read that since workers' unionization is a right in line with the provisions of the extant laws, the management of Dangote Refinery and Petrochemicals agreed to unionization of employees of Dangote Refinery and unionization of employees of petrochemicals who are willing to unionize. Meanwhile, the federal government says there is no immediate plan to implement the 5% petroleum product tax contained in the new tax legislation. The Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, made this known at a press briefing in Abuja. The tax has generated widespread anger among Nigerians, with organized labor issuing the government an ultimatum to cancel it or face industrial action. Meanwhile, the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, has stated that President Tinubu's recent temporary suspension of raw share exports is a bold and strategic measure aimed at unlocking the vast economic potentials of Nigeria's share industry and positioning the country as a global leader in the share economy. The minister made this remark as a special guest of honor at the 20th Institute of Chartered Accountants, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICANN. Looking at the Northern Zonal Accountants Conference in Minna, Niger State. Idris hails from Niger State, which is the epicenter of share production in Nigeria. Represented by the Director General of the Voice of Nigeria, Malam Jabrin Baba Ndes, the minister said President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's recent temporary suspension of raw share exports is not a mere policy experiment, but a bold and forward-looking measure aimed at unlocking the full potential of a rural economy. By insisting that more of our share be processed locally, the president is ensuring that Nigeria, which accounts for over 50% of the world's share production, does not remain a supplier of raw materials but becomes a global leader in high-value share products. He noted that Niger State, the hub of share production in Nigeria, stands to benefit tremendously from this transformative initiative. Still under President Bola Tinubu has directed financial and capital market authorities to monitor the increasing use of stable coins and digital currencies in Nigeria, cautioning that the shift away from traditional banking systems presents emerging challenges that must be proactively managed. Speaking at the 18th Annual Banking and Finance Conference of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria in Abuja, Tinubu, represented by the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, acknowledged the global financial system's rapid transformation. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Security and Exchange Commission has intensified its regulatory oversight of digital currencies following the enactment of the Investment and Securities Act 2025, which formally classifies digital assets as securities. Still in Nigeria, the Federal Ministry of Works has adopted a funding prioritization, the framework to guarantee the continuation of critical road projects earlier financed by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited under the Road Infrastructure Development and Refurbishment Investment Tax Credit Scheme. The Minister of Works, Senator David Umahi, disclosed this during an inspection tour of the dualization of the East-West Road, Section 3A, from Eleme Junction to One Junction in Rivers State on September 9, 2025, according to reports. Umahi explained that the move aligns with President Bola Tinubu's directive that all inherited NMPCL's funded projects must continue without interruption. According to Umahi, the ministry has compiled all projects inherited by NMPCL and submitted them to the President. He stressed that those along national economic corridors, such as the Eleme One Road, would receive top priority. The Works Minister used the inspection visit to caution contractors against poor construction methods. He highlighted the practice of laying binder courses without covering them with a wearing course for months, which weakens roads and accelerates failure. Omahi directed federal controllers nationwide to enforce stricter supervision and warned that contracts below 20 billion naira would no longer be awarded to expatriate firms. And now we'll go on a quick break, and when we're back, Business 360 continues looking at further indices in global economic standings and the market and setting the priorities, looking at what the price levels are in the market. Don't go anywhere. From 4.7% in the same month a year earlier, marking the highest level since August 2022. The number of unemployed individuals increased to 2.59 million from 2.38 million in July 2024, while the total number of employed persons fell to 46.05 million from 47.68 million. Among major industry sectors, the services sector continued to employ the largest share of workers at 62.8% of the total employed population, followed by industry at 18.7% and agriculture at 18.5%. Meanwhile, the labor force participation rate declined to 60.7% from 63.5% a year earlier, indicating fewer Filipinos aged 15 and over were active in the labor markets. On average, employed individuals worked 42 hours per week, slightly higher than the 41.1 hours recorded in July 2024, suggesting a modest increase in workload among those employed. As you're looking at economic standings, and now to Africa, as Egypt's inflation rate is at near 3.5-year low. The annual urban inflation rate in Egypt slowed for the third consecutive month to 12% in August 2025, down from 13.9% in July, after reaching a 4-month high in May, due to rising fuel prices and below market focus of 12.7%. This marked the lowest inflation rate since March 2022, mainly driven by a sharp slowdown in food inflation, which fell to its lowest level since May 2021. The price increases also moderated across several categories, including transport, restaurants, as well as hotels, clothing, and miscellaneous goods and services. Meanwhile, prices accelerated for housing and furnishing. And now, let's go to the chart indicating Egypt's inflation rate, the chart this morning. I talk about Egypt's inflation rate. A price level as at last year September was at about 26.2%. I began to increase a bit, about 26.4% in September, and started slowing down by 2025 January, while inflation in Egypt had gone to 24%, and a sudden drop even in March this year at 11.6%, began to go up a bit in May, 16.8%. Reducing even further to 12%, indicating reduction in the cost of commodities in Egypt, as well as the strength of the Egyptian pound in the markets. And now to commodity markets as oil rises on Middle East tension. WTI crude oil futures rose above $63 per barrel today, extending gains for the third straight session, driven by concerns of potential supply disruption amid rising Middle East tension. The Israeli military reported striking Hamas leadership in Doha, Qatar, and marking a further escalation of its ongoing campaign across the Middle East. The attack came just hours after Israel warned it was preparing to strike Gaza City. This geopolitical tension added to bullish pressure from OPEC Plus's modest production increase for October, which was much smaller than previous months' hikes. Meanwhile, reports indicate that U.S. President Donald Trump has urged the EU to impose 100% tariffs on Chinese and Indian goods. We're looking forward to all the pressure from Russian President Vladimir Putin, with the U.S. signaling it could implement similar measures. And now let's go to the market then and see what the prices of these commodities are in the market. The energy market first, afterwards we'll look at the metals and agricultural markets, the energy markets. Energy commodities, beginning with crude oil, the U.S. crude, mostly known as West Texas Intermediate Crude, WTI crude for short. Our price level stands at $63 per barrel, gaining 0.582 points, a 0.93 percentage appreciation. Brent, which represents Nigeria's price benchmark, at $66 per barrel, upward by 0.594 points, a 0.9%. Natural gas falling, gasoline a little here, a little there, heating oil, no significant change in the market. And now to the metals. A metal commodity definitely begins with the price of gold at $3,647 per ounce, gaining 19 points, a 0.55 percentage appreciation. A silver price also gaining 0.6%, copper price dropping a negative 0.04%, volatility quite low in that. Also look at the state of the naira, the Euro USD market. The Euro USD market indicates the price level at 1.16 point mark, and while the euro falling against the US dollar but not of significant change as volatility is quite low in the market. The pound against the US dollar price level stands at 1.35 US dollar to 1 pound. The pound gaining, but volatility not much in this market. The Australian dollar also gaining against the US dollar 0.17%. Well, quickly let's look at the state of the naira. The US dollar against the naira. A US dollar against the naira price level stands at 1,509 naira to the US dollar. The dollar gaining 4 points over the naira, a 0.28 percentage appreciation for the dollar. And the euro at 1,771 naira to the euro gaining 10 points over the naira. And the naira seems to be struggling against the majors, just as the pound is gaining 13 points over the naira at 2,047 naira to the pound. Just last week, the pound was doing better, the naira was doing better than the majors. This week, the majors are superseding the pounds. As the naira rather. As we set to close, let's conclude with the cryptocurrency market. What the price of Bitcoin is. A Bitcoin price stands at 112,552 US dollars. A Bitcoin gaining 1,021 points this morning. Quite concerning for many, at 0.92%. Most of the investors seem to be struggling who are predicting that Bitcoin will be going downward, are included. Ether, a price level at 4,326 US dollars, gaining 18 points. Ether gaining 0.42%, Binance gaining 4.1%, Cardano, Solana, all on the positive. The crypto market seemed to be rising at the early hours of this morning. Well, is it the much we can take in the world of business today? Thank you for being a part of it. My name is Blyden Kim, and thank you for watching.